Eva did not run because she was weak. She ran because her body understood the truth before her mind could afford to name it. The moment she crossed the threshold of Izaiah's private space, the world she had been carefully trained to accept collapsed into a single, nauseating clarity. The calm he wore like a second skin had never been peace, only discipline, only practice. His cleanliness had never been care, only control. Even the warmth he gave her in carefully measured doses had never been tenderness, only a leash that tightened without leaving marks. In the first seconds after the discovery, fear drove her forward, but it was anger that kept her moving. It burned through her veins with a humiliating heat because she finally saw how many of her choices had not been hers at all. She had mistaken his patience for respect, his attentiveness for love, his habit of remembering details for devotion, when it had all been surveillance dressed up as intimacy. That betrayal was not only his, it felt like her own betrayal of herself, because she had ignored the unease that sometimes rose in her throat. She had swallowed it down to avoid conflict. She had rehearsed excuses on his behalf until the excuses became part of her identity. Now, with every step she took away from him, the memory of those excuses turned into knives. Her mind replayed what she had seen in fragments that refused to stay still. Notes organized like schedules, a grid of dates and locations, pictures cropped to hide faces but preserving bodies, habits, routines, a sickened kind of devotion to patterns. The file with her name was not a sentimental folder of keepsakes. It was a dossier. It did not describe her as a person. It listed her as a subject, a problem to be solved, a possession to be managed. The handwriting in the margins had not trembled with emotion. It had been sharp, deliberate, almost proud. And beneath it all, the most corrosive truth was not the objects themselves, but the intention behind them, the unmistakable sense that she was not her first, that the room did not exist for her alone, that she had stepped into the center of a ritual already perfected. She had always believed evil would announce itself loudly, with violence and noise, but Izaiah's kind of evil was quieter, a mathematics of domination, a slow tightening around someone's life until they confused captivity with safety. When Eva burst into the night, she expected relief to wash over her. Instead, she felt contaminated by knowledge, as if simply seeing what she saw had made her complicit. Her anger sharpened into something more dangerous, the urge to destroy him, not just escape him. Yet even that rage split in two, because part of her still carried the old imprint of him, still wanted to believe there was an explanation, still wanted to drag him back into the version of reality where she had not been a fool. That internal war humiliated her more than any external threat. She hated the trembling in her hands because it proved he had already rewired her instincts. She hated that her mind tried to bargain. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe he had reasons, maybe she could handle it quietly, because bargaining was exactly how the trap worked. And she hated herself most for the fleeting thought that exposure might destroy her too, because he had been close enough to gather the kind of knowledge that could ruin a person without leaving fingerprints. Eva's first impulse was to go straight to someone who could make the fear official, someone with authority, someone who would take the weight off her shoulders. But her second impulse, stronger, colder, warned her that the world did not reward women who told the truth about men like Izaiah. Men like him build their power by appearing harmless. Men like him curated reputations the way they curated rooms, immaculate, believable, and designed to make anyone who challenged them look hysterical. She remembered how easily he turned tension into calm, how he could make a room soften around him, how he could look like the victim even while tightening the blade. The thought of stepping into a public space with her terror exposed made her rage turn inward again, because she could already feel people asking why she had stayed, why she had trusted him, why she had been there in the first place. Shame was part of his architecture. Even after she ran, the architecture remained inside her. The phone in her pocket felt suddenly like a weapon that could explode in her hand. If she called her help, she risked being tracked. If she did not, she risked being swallowed. Every decision became a blade. Eva found herself measuring distances, scanning shadows, hearing every passing car as a threat. Her fear was real, but her anger was clearer. Izaiah had stolen her sense of normal. He had turned the world into a corridor with no safe doors. That theft felt personal in the deepest way, because it did not just threaten her body, it threatened her identity. He had taken the parts of her that believed in kindness and twisted them into vulnerabilities. He had learned her patterns not to love her better, but to control her more efficiently. And now, to survive, she had to become someone she never wanted to be. Suspicious, strategic, willing to hurt others if necessary. While Eva hid and tried to make sense of what came next, Izaiah's world was breaking in a different way. He was not panicking as an ordinary person panicked. His fury was precise. The discovery was not simply a threat to his secret, it was an insult to his self-image. He had built his life on the belief that he was the one who saw clearly, the one who understood people beneath their masks, the one who deserved to orchestrate outcomes because he was smarter, calmer, more disciplined. Eva's escape did not read as fear to him, it read as betrayal. She had violated the rules he believed he had the right to set. And behind his rage was a deeper wound, the terror of losing control, the terror of being exposed as ordinary, of being looked at with the disgust he had always projected onto others. That terror hardened instantly into cruelty, because cruelty was easier than self-reflection. If he could not recapture Eva physically, he would recapture the narrative. He would turn her fear into evidence of instability. He would turn her silence into consent. He would turn her truth into a story people laughed at. Eva felt the first ripple of that strategy before she even saw him again. The atmosphere around her changed. Familiar faces suddenly carried a hint of distance, not because they knew the full story, but because they sensed there was a story, and they had already been nudged toward the version that painted Eva as the problem. Her rage surged because it confirmed what she already suspected. Izaiah did not need to chase her down in an alley to trap her. He could trap her socially, professionally, emotionally. He could starve her of credibility until she doubted herself enough to crawl back. That realization pulled Eva into a darker place. She did not just want to survive, she wanted to hit him where it hurt. Yet she also understood the price. If she went to war with him, she could lose everything she had built. If she stayed silent, she could keep her life, but surrender her soul. The decision was not heroic. It was ugly. It was a choice between different kinds of death. At the center of Eva's internal conflict was a single brutal question. How much collateral damage was she willing to accept to destroy him? Because Izaiah's secret was not a private sickness contained in one room. It had roots. Someone had helped him. Someone had ignored warnings. Someone had benefited from his reputation. If she exposed him, she might expose the people who had introduced him into her circle, the people who had vouched for him, the people who would rather bury her truth than admit their own complicity. The thought made her furious enough to shake, because she could already feel the pressure forming around her, the subtle suggestion to handle it privately, to avoid scandal, to protect the community. She could see how quickly protection turned into silencing. She could feel how easily her suffering could be used as a bargaining chip in someone else's reputation management. That was the moment Eva's fear began to mutate into something colder. She stopped thinking like a victim. She began thinking like a strategist. She returned to the memory of the room, not to torture herself, but to extract facts. Her anger forced her mind to sharpen. She remembered the arrangement of the files, the labels, the order that revealed what he valued. She remembered the devices that looked innocent at first glance. She remembered the way the lights were positioned, not for comfort but for visibility. She remembered the items that did not belong to her and could not be explained away as misunderstandings. And as she replayed the scene, she realized something that changed everything. Izaiah had not just been watching, he had been recording. The scale of his system implied long practice and careful backups. That meant evidence existed somewhere beyond that room. That meant his control was also his weakness, because control required documentation. He could not resist keeping trophies, keeping proof, keeping the sense that his reality was the only reality. Eva's next steps were not clean or noble. She broke rules she once would have respected. She hid things she once would have confessed. She manipulated people she once would have trusted. Each compromise tasted like poison, but she swallowed it anyway, because the alternative was to be swallowed first. Her anger kept her from collapsing into paralysis, but it also threatened to turn her into the very kind of person she despised. That contradiction was the hardest part. She wanted justice, yet she could feel the seductive pull of vengeance. Justice would expose him. Vengeance wanted him to suffer. Justice required patience and precision. Vengeance wanted a match and gasoline. She hated that part of herself, hated that he had awakened it, hated that her moral identity now felt like a luxury she could not afford. At times she caught herself imagining his face when he realized she was not coming back, not yielding, not shrinking, and the satisfaction that flared in her chest made her feel monstrous. Then she would remember the dossier, the cold handwriting, the sense of being cataloged like prey, and she would decide that a little monstrosity might be the price of survival. Meanwhile, Izaiah's anger evolved into a different weapon, inevitability. He began tightening the walls around her without needing to appear. He knew which door she would try first. He knew which people she might run to. He knew which truths she would hesitate to speak because she feared judgment. He had studied her too well. And that knowledge did not just make him dangerous, it made Eva furious in a way she had never been before. She realized she was fighting not only the man, but the version of herself that had been trained to doubt, to accommodate, to soften her instincts for the comfort of others. Every time she considered backing down, she saw the invisible chain around her throat. Every time she considered exposing him, she pictured the fallout. Her life became a series of tight corners, and in each corner her emotions collided. Fear slamming into rage, rage slamming into grief, grief slamming into stubborn determination. The turning point did not arrive as a triumphant revelation. It arrived as a painful understanding. Eva could not win by staying the person she used to be. The old Eva would have tried to keep things tidy, to protect everyone's comfort, to preserve the illusion of normal. The old Eva would have chosen silence and called it peace. But peace built on denial was exactly what allowed men like Izaiah to thrive. So she made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. She chose the uglier path of truth, even if it meant sacrificing her image, even if it meant losing people who claimed to love her, even if it meant standing alone in the aftermath. That decision did not erase her fear. It transformed it into something she could carry. And it did not calm her anger. It focused it, turning it from wildfire into a blade. Eva stopped running in circles and started moving with intent. She began gathering what she could without relying on anyone's permission. She prepared for the possibility that exposing him would not save her immediately, that the first response might be disbelief, that the backlash might be brutal. She braced for how lonely righteousness could feel when it threatened powerful reputations. And still she moved forward, because the idea of living under his shadow was worse than the idea of being torn apart by the storm he would unleash. At the same time, Izaiah sensed the shift. He recognized the difference between a frightened woman and a determined enemy. That recognition triggered a final, vicious clarity in him. If he could not control her, he would destroy her. His rage became absolute, not loud but methodical, the kind of rage that smiles while sharpening knives. By the time Eva understood how close the walls were, she was already pressed against them. The trap was not one dramatic moment. It was a tightening sequence: reputation, isolation, doubt, fear, designed to make her surrender. And the most terrifying part was that it almost worked, because there were nights when exhaustion made her crave any ending, even a bad one. But then she would remember the room, the files, the sick devotion to control, and she would feel anger rise again, not as chaos, but as purpose. She was not simply trying to survive Izaiah anymore. She was trying to take back the parts of herself he had attempted to own. She knew the next step would cost her something. She knew she might have to betray someone who had betrayed her first. She knew she might have to expose secrets that would blow up more than one life. She knew the moment she acted, there would be no return to the illusion. And that was the point. Eva had already lost the illusion the instant she saw what Izaiah really was. Now the only question left was how much darkness she was willing to walk through to ensure he could never build another room like that again.